Welcome to the Northeast Kingdom Voice. I'm your host, Scott Wheeler. Today's guest is Kate On of the Korean Broadcasting System. She and her crew have been here on the northern border studying life in this region of the world. Welcome to the show, Kate.
Thank you for having me.
Hey, what brings you to our part of the world? Because you're from Washington, D.C., correct?
Yes, I'm from Washington, D.C. I'm originally from South Korea, and we were deciding what to do next for our news documentary, and I came upon a Washington Post article about Derby Line and Stansted, and that beautiful story about the flower pots that divided the two borders. So that's why we're here, to meet the locals.
And I've turned the tables on you because you actually contacted me
Yes.
to interview me. And so I said, yeah, you can interview me, but why don't you come on my show? So that's why you're here today.
Yes, I am. I've heard that you are quite an amateur historian of Derby area, and so I wanted to meet such a personable character myself, but I was not, I was kind of flabbergasted when you turned the tables on me like this, but I'm glad to be here.
Right. Well, actually, you're not the first one for me to do this to. Almost everybody who wants to come here to interview me, I say, hey, that's great, but can I interview you? And so it'll be interesting how this show goes. We have two people who are used to interviewing people, so maybe you'll again turn the tables on me. You know what I call myself? I don't even call myself a historian. I call myself a chronicler of history because I have my degree in psychology, and there's the historians. They've done a great job around here, recording the history. I record living history. I like talking to the people who actually lived, I think the oldest person I've ever interviewed was 104. And so that's what I call myself, a chronicler of history. So what are you finding out here on the border? Life.
Well, we just got here. First of all, my first impression was Vermont, that it's so green. I'm from the city, so it's just such a respite. It seems like such a beautiful place to live. And as I'm meeting a couple of the locals in the Derby Line area, I'm just falling in love with the small town life. Yeah.
Are you being well received by people in the stores, in the motel where you're staying?
I am, yeah. The locals, they've been welcoming, and they've been giving me a lot of pointers where to eat, where to go. So I'm very thankful.
Right. No, I think we're pretty welcoming lot. I think sometimes because a lot of us have been here for generations, either when I say here, I don't necessarily mean on this side of the border, but this side or that side, because a lot of our origins, it goes back and forth. My family's been here, most of my family's been here since probably the days since the glaciers pulled away. In other words, they've been here for generations. And I think sometimes, being locals, we sometimes forget how unique our border is.
No, definitely. I think this is very unique to live in the same village, and just, across the street you have Canadians, but you don't consider them foreigners, like a different country. And I see that you guys all seem to be like the same village people.
Right.
It sounds like it was, sort of like the same town, but it's kind of changed after 2001.
Right. Yeah. After 9/11. If you think the border is unique now, it's like, compared to before 9/11, this is like a military checkpoint now. In other words, it's changed drastically. Before 9/11, you could pretty much go, if you were a local, you could go across with a wave of the hand. You could go back and forth, relatively unbothered. 9/11 changed that for right and wrong. I think we had to change some, and then since 9/11, we've gone through phases where at first, it took them a while to change anything after 9/11, but then they went. Operation Stone Garden is where they got totally insane, where it almost made it impossible for local people to even go about their lives. Suddenly they wanted to start busting everybody. And now I think we've got a level of normalcy back. I think we found a place where we can all live.
I read about that Operation Stone Garden online, and I was wondering if you can tell me more about it. I mean, it seemed like some sort of a military operation right here in this sleepy town.
It was actually, it did, in my opinion, and law enforcement tells me from their opinion it's not true, and which I respect. I have many friends in law enforcement, but to me, it was they did so much wrong. They flooded this area with law enforcement, and they weren't all federal people. It was a federal program. They would bring in municipal cops from around the state who wanted to make extra money, and they didn't know the finer points of living on the border. And people were just going about their lives, and they were being bothered. And well, the way the border works is you have the Border Patrol, then you have the folks who man the ports of entry, but they're not the real guardians of the border. They're the ones who are paid to guard the border. It's the residents who live along the border who are the true eyes and ears. And the lawmen, the local lawmen, because don't get me wrong, most of the local Border Patrol, they're super. They understand the dance there is, that they don't want to go out of their way to bother the local people because they want to hear from them. I've been out on patrol with the head of this sector, Fernando Beltran. That guy he's a blessing to this region. He's he knows what hard work is. I've done a story on him. He used to be a migrant worker who rose up the ranks here, so he knows what hard work is. If he's driving along the border and he sees a farmer putting up fence, he's liable to get out, help the person with the fencing, and that does more good. That goodwill really protects the border. Just treating the people decently. During Stone Garden, as I said, they flooded the area with people who didn't understand that. They wanted tickets. They wanted to write tickets, and they didn't even, some of them didn't even understand exactly where the border was. So yeah, it was a nightmare. But fortunately, our federal people from Washington D.C. managed to lasso Stone Garden in a little bit, and the border will never go back to what it was, and it probably shouldn't. But we're back to I think occasionally when you're crossing back into the country, you get some of the border folks who I think they can lighten up a bit, but I think they've even come around a little bit, because I personally don't mind popping open my trunk, because let's be real, local people also break laws. And I think over the years before 9/11, there was a fair share of smuggling.
And I give them credit. I mean, they're just doing their job, and it's a serious job for them. So I understand their point of view, but we're here just to talk to the locals to see how life has changed for them, how these security measures, when it went up. I mean, it's not their fault that the security measures are going up. They're not creating the crime. I'm talking about
I think you could still have a very tough job and be civil while you're doing it, and I do think it's gotten better. The Border Patrol, as far as I'm concerned, the Border Patrol, the ones who actually patrol, I find them to be, a lot of them are the best of the best. They're very congenial, and I think part of that is because of their supervisor, as is Fernando Beltran, just a super guy, and he kind of leads through example. So no, I think it's I think it's a great place to live. But you know, back in the day, when I was in high school, you know, that was the place to go drinking, because there was a saying, if you could see over the bar, you could get served. And so it's been and that goes back, crossing the border.
Are you talking about Checkpoint Charlie? That bar on the border? Is that what you're talking about?
There was all kinds of bars
there's
over
some
there.
bars,
Even during Prohibition, because as you probably know, my first book was Rum Runners and Revenue, is Prohibition in Vermont. Even back then, the people in Quebec were helping us alcohol-thirsty Americans get our alcohol. So, you haven't at this point, when I'm interviewing you right now, you haven't actually interviewed many people yet?
We've met a couple people, but the one person we interviewed was Buzzy Roy.
Oh, Buzzy.
Yes, he was a joy.
Oh, Buzzy, yes. Buzzy, you know, maybe people might not like how Buzzy handled that whole Stone Garden thing, but he brought sanity back to the border. He was the one who he fought the federal government, and in the long run, in a way he lost, but he spent thousands to bring sanity back. And you know, some people viewing this are going to say, no, Buzzy's going to go down as a folk hero. He does not hate the Border Patrol. He does not hate the customs. He just wants to be able to go about living his life and doing business on the border. And he took them on head on, and I think that he really made us get a bit of sanity back on the border.
Yeah, he was telling us yesterday about how he did what he did because of the principle of the thing. How illogical, you know, how things were done by the locals. There was a way, and you know, law enforcement were telling him, you need to stop doing that and check in here and there. But he was going to check in. So, you know, I see that, what's the word, that, you know, additional steps that you have to go through that, you know, in your everyday life, like going up to get a pizza across the border and stuff like that, has been affected. But he's somewhat of a local hero, though, right? For standing up.
Yeah, I believe so. And he, as I said, he doesn't just grumble about everything that goes on. I believe Buzzy understands things had to change, but it didn't have to change to such a degree as it did when he did what he did. You know, where he went for his pizza, and the next thing he knows, he's in a lockup. You know, maybe some people wouldn't have done it that way, but on the other hand, is sometimes you have to go to the extremes to get you know, especially to get the media to take attention, because here he was, this pharmacist who has a generational pharmacy, who he enjoys, you know, going out on the lake in his sailboat, and suddenly, after he after he decided to smuggle pizzas across the border, and he weren't really smuggling them, suddenly he became probably a worldwide voice, because he's been interviewed by far more people than I have even, and because, you know, he wasn't this person who set out to break the law. He didn't set out to make a name for himself, and he just set out to, come on, guys, we have to live here.
Right. So when he told me that, you know, reporters from Russia and just all over the world was interested in interviewing him and hearing his story and why he did what he did and stuff like that, I started to think about, a lot of people in the world is interested in the concept of a border, whether it's invisible or visible. So we all, you know, have the same thoughts about restrictions and safety and security.
Now, can I add, you might not want me to ask this, but in your country, your border with North Korea is That's a totally different thing.
Oh yeah, DMZ. This is.
So you don't have flower pots guarding the border.
No, we have guards guarding the border.
Right. So when you go up there and you see the flower pots, what do you think?
I mean, I've seen NPR, I've seen other news articles and saw pictures of the flower pots, and I saw it myself yesterday. I thought it was a beautiful gesture. I thought, it's maybe it signified the friendship and the camaraderie between the U.S. and Canada, their relationship. But it's a symbolic.
Right.
It's symbolic, I think.
Right.
Yeah, instead of having a gate right there.
Right. I was interviewed by a group from probably the same group that Buzzy was, from one of the breakaway republics of Russia, and they were just totally amazed. They were totally amazed for a number of reasons. They were amazed just that they're just flower pots, but then they went down on the southern border. Even in our own country, they were saying how the borders are, totally, well, not totally guarded differently, but the southern border, they said is just much more militaristic versus this border. And that's how it comes. Sometimes we locals have a tendency to whine a little bit about the changes, and I'm more understanding that things did have to change, because it is a different world, and the one thing I do respect, especially the Border Patrol, they understand there's another side of life in the kingdom that we don't see. Like, we don't realize there are people passing through. 'Cause we are on a major corridor between the cities, southern cities in New England, even Washington D.C., and the big cities in Montreal. So there are things that go on here that we just don't understand or we don't know about. We had active smuggling operations, as I said. During Prohibition, it was a big smuggling area, and it still is now.
Yeah, I read about the history of Haskell Public Library and how back in the day, I don't know if it's the 1800s or the 1900s, but they used to have the back door to the library, and there was some, I don't know, drug smuggling action or stuff like that. But that's, and they've blocked that off now. But can you tell me a little bit about the Haskell Library?
Well, the Haskell just celebrated its, just a few years ago, celebrated its 100th birthday. And I'm not exactly sure why it was built the way it was, but this is what my theory was. It was built on the border as the centerpiece it was a centerpiece of two communities, but in reality it was one working community, because the way Stansted, the Rock Island section of Stansted and Derby Line is made, it is really one. At one time, it was one functioning community. It was just that border that was there. And I don't know if you've heard, is the 45th parallel was supposed to be the border, but something happened, and basically part of Derby Line actually lies in what was supposed to be Quebec, and Quebec hasn't asked for it back yet. So I guess Derby Line residents are still okay being Derby Line residents, not residents of Stansted. But so I think it was built as a centerpiece, and it really has continued to be. When you go to a play in the Opera House, if I get this right, you're sitting in the United States and you're watching a play that is occurring in Quebec.
Yeah, I read about that.
But to be fair, though, is it takes it to maintain this relationship, this border library. The workers also have to remain vigilant, and so if somebody thinks they're going to pull off something there, they might get away with it. There's a good chance they won't. The workers keep a really good eye on the comings and goings, and usually if you haven't noticed, there's usually a Border Patrol officer stationed outside by the flower pots. I don't know if you've noticed that yet.
I saw them outside, but if what you're saying is that the staff of the library has to be vigilant on top of what their jobs, then don't you think it might be a little stressful for them if they're there day in and day out, having to be vigilant all the time?
Yeah, that's a question you should ask of them, because I think they do a pretty good job of it. But I do wonder what the future will bring for the Haskell, whether it'll even more security will tighten it up. It's my understanding if you have it, because there's still other houses on the border that are built on the border, and it's my understanding if they were to burn down, you cannot rebuild. So I suppose that would be true if God forbid, if the Haskell ever burned. I'm not sure if it can actually legally be rebuilt.
Oh, that would be a tragedy, I think.
Yeah, but I don't think we have to worry. The Haskell's been there over 100 years. And but that's what I understand. If you own one of these houses or one of these barns that are on...
Half in, half right.
Now, you were asking me before the show, how did the Northeast Kingdom get its name?
Yes.
Well, there's different stories about that. I believe it was 1949, the late great Vermont governor turned U.S. Senator George Aiken was in Lyndonville, and now here's the deal: different reports say different thing. Did he in 1949 at a meeting in Lyndonville, he did say the Vermont, the Northeast Kingdom. But there's other evidence he wasn't the one who coined the phrase, that some local people who were looking for, because this is a historically poor section of the country, at least of the state, and they were looking for something to name themselves that would give you name recognition. And so at minimum, Senator Aiken popularized the phrase, because from what I understand, the local people had, a couple local guys had started using it, saying this was a good name for this tri-county region, Orleans, Essex, and Caledonia counties. And then somebody of the senator's stature comes to the Northeast Kingdom, and he uses that phrase, and everybody listens. But one way or the other, without Senator Aiken, we wouldn't have had the phrase the Northeast Kingdom.
But what does it mean?
The Northeast Kingdom means things to different people. The Northeast Kingdom, his widow, who died not too many years ago at 101, said that Senator Aiken loved to come fishing here, and he just thought of it as God's kingdom. And he loved the people, because he said even though they lived without, they were just so welcoming to everybody. He said she said the people were, even the poorest of people had no idea that they were poor, because to them they were rich to be able to live here without the trappings of city life and that was her take on it. And she died, I think it was 101 or 102. And I should note that Lola Aiken was his wife, and she drove until almost 100. So she was on my show a number of times. So that's her story. There's different stories on what he meant by it, but they were trying to coin something to draw attention to this region of the state, and I think they've done a pretty good job. If you're going to come to the kingdom for excitement, you're probably not going to get it. But if you want to come to fish and hunt and relax, that's more the thing.
Well, when the impression that I got from the term Northeast Kingdom was sort of, like a sanctuary, like a respite, to become one with nature and driving around.
Well, that's kind of what that's what probably the senator's wife would have agreed with.
Yeah, so she's, I think, spot on.
Right. And so have you enjoyed being out of the city?
I have. I mean, I love the city. I'm not gonna say anything against it, but then this has been very, very therapeutic.
Your Washington D.C. I can't get enough of it. I have yet to even come close to. To visiting all the historic places down here. I will tell you though, the funny story. When I served in the Vermont House, I was down in Washington D.C. and I was walking around with a legislator from West Virginia, and we ended up getting a little lost down there, and we couldn't. So I had to actually. I had to call my wife a couple times to Google search to find out where exactly we were, and we finally found our way. But I was this rural hick from rural Vermont, and he was a pharmacist from rural West Virginia, and we're kind of staggering around down in Washington D.C., but we loved it.
Yeah. Well, now Washington D.C. has those city ambassadors on every block, I think, in the downtown and National Mall area, where they wear either a gold uniform or a red uniform. They help out tourists and people who are lost all the time.
Oh, they'd be helping me all the time. Now, have you ever seen when the honor flights come to town with bringing the World War II veterans and all the bikers that turn out? That's the most phenomenal experience I've been down with a friend who's a World War II veteran, and we're like, wow. Or do you stop seeing those things when you're there?
No, it's done every year, and I was actually there for Memorial Day, and I saw it, and it impresses me every time.
Right.
The rolling thunder, people coming in from all over, just driving in, and also those jets and planes flying over, and to honor the veterans. Right. It's touching every time, every year, but it hits you right there.
Right. Well, I'm glad you don't stop, because I was wondering if you were there all the time, whether you just walk by and you don't even notice anymore. So you notice the beauty of your city too still.
There is still the beauty of the city, of our nation's capital.
Right. Well, I am going to give you some gifts from the Northeast Kingdom.
Oh.
And here's 3 of my books.
Oh, thank you.
My Rum Runners book, particularly, you might find helpful about life on the border.
Thank you.
And I even have a Northeast Kingdom shirt for you, so you can bring home and I have a couple for your crew who is sitting here in the background.
Thank you.
So I just wanted to send you home with a piece of the kingdom.
Oh, I appreciate it. Thank you. I'm just so grateful to your warm welcome, and this has been great meeting you.
Well, it was great the way you told me you contacted me. You saw me on the ABC News, and what did you say?
I said, I need to go and interview this guy. He's so personable.
So, okay, well, I really appreciate you coming here, and I think it's great that we're attracting the attention of the world, and a lot of people are discovering us, which is good and which is bad. We kind of like our way of life, but I personally like sharing it with the rest of the world.
Well, thank you so much for having me here.
Right, and thank you for coming on. And thank you to the viewers for tuning in to another segment of the Northeast Kingdom Voice.